Ed, would you start us in prayer?
Oh, sure. Heavenly Father, just thank you for today. Lord, just ask you
Oh, well
to
then
guide and direct our conversation and give us a good time learning more of your word. Thank you for your goodness to us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're on Revelation chapter 14 this time. Jonathan, you should have had this one.
I thought that's what he said to you last week.
I was telling somebody the other day, as I've been reading this chapter and studying it out, that I need more of the sense of the holiness of God. Because when you read about the judgments that are coming, it's like, oh my. It's just, I don't know, it's just really kind of rocked my heart to think of anybody having to deal with being separated from God eternally. It just rocks your boat, and I think really the only thing that just kind of settles the boat is if we understand what holiness really is and how sin is and what is created in the earth. And my most current thing would be the October 7th horror in Israel, where you see just how dark evil really can be. But it's just something we have to deal with. And I think as Christians, we like to put that off. And, I don't like to think about the judgment, the wrath of God. But it's a reality, and it's proclaimed throughout the scriptures, but you can't avoid it if you're reading Revelation, these next chapters. So, let's dig in. Sharon, will you read the first 5 verses of chapter 14?
The first 5 of chapter 14, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Then I looked, and behold, a Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. They sang as it were a new song before the throne, before the 4 living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God.
So I think in this chapter, it's kind of like, well, Amir calls it, he said it's like going to the movies. And I don't know if you guys have been reading Amir's book, but he said it's like going to the movies and you're waiting for the production that you've paid your ticket for, and you have all these previews of movies that are to come. And he describes this Revelation 14 as being kind of like that it actually, I think, is a series of what I have listed down as 7 visions. You could break it up a little differently, but it kind of it goes back even to the first part of Revelation, and then it gives us a preview of what is to come in the rest of the book of Revelation, so that we're going to kind of get a preview in that sense. And the first vision that we see is what Sharon just read to us in those first few chapters. And I was thinking about, the first thing is, behold, a lamb. And I was thinking of what we've already seen revealed in the book of Revelation about the Lamb, and I've just listed those here on the sheet. In chapter 5, verse 6, we saw the Lamb, the crucified Lamb, the Lamb as if he had been slain, looking as if he had been slain. And then we have the glorified Lamb in chapter 5. We have the justified or worthy, the Lamb that is worthy in Revelation 6, and magnified in Revelation 7. And now in chapter 14, we're going to see the Lamb vindicated. And that's where the wrath comes, the vindication of the Lamb. And just about anybody you read, there's going to be different interpretations of who these 144,000 are that are standing with the Lamb on Mount Zion. I think the 144,000 are the same as the ones we see in chapter 7. Remember we read about in chapter 7 about the 144,000 who were chosen, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And these are the Jewish evangelists who take the gospel to the people in the earth during the time, the beginning of the tribulation. And if we look back there in chapter 7, it says that they were sealed, in verse 3, they were sealed as the servants of God on their foreheads. And so that's one of the clues that I use to interpret who these 144,000 are, because it says that they have the Lamb's Father's name written on their foreheads. And so that's one of the things that to me kind of identifies who these are, these 144,000. And then standing on Mount Zion with him. And the first thing that came to my mind was Psalm 2:6, which is where the Lord declares that he has set his king on Mount Zion. I'll turn there real quick, or maybe not so quick, I'm not very quick, but
Yet I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion.
yeah. And go ahead and read the next part of that, Eileen.
I will declare the decree the Lord has said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance, and the ends of the earth for your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, you shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel.
And maybe just go ahead and finish it, because it's so appropriate.
Now therefore be wise, O kings, be instructed, you judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all who put their trust in him.
So in this case, I think it's speaking about earthly Zion, you know, that earthly place which is Jerusalem. And I think it actually points to, it's a prophetic view of the second coming, when Jesus will come and set up his throne on the earth in Zion. And then the second one that I had put down here was Zechariah 14, and we don't need to turn there, but just be reminded that that is the prophetic pronouncement of, again, the king coming and setting up his kingdom on earth, from Zechariah 14. And it actually talks about the fact that all those who are left following this end-time battle will come up to Jerusalem to worship the king at the Feast of Tabernacles, at the end of chapter 14 of Zechariah. So I am taking this Mount Zion reference here as being on the earth. Now, other people that I read, they refer to Hebrews 12, where it talks about that there's the heavenly Jerusalem. And so, I think you just have to ask the Lord to kind of give us the overall essence of what's being said here. Not to be confused by it, but just, and that's why I put down other references, that we can take from other places in the Bible and help interpret what the Revelation is actually telling us. But I am understanding it to be on the earth, that these 144,000 are, it's being projected into the future, where they stand with the Lamb at his return in Mount Zion. And then we have this voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, and the sound of harpists playing their harps and singing a new song before the throne. And here again, we have the voice from heaven, but we also have a throne. And those standing before the throne are singing a new song. And only the 144,000 can sing that song, which I think is really interesting. I'm not sure what that means.
That'd be quite a chorus.
Must be quite a chorus. And all I could think of in terms of, it's a song that only they could sing, is that it's just a personal testimony in song and praise that comes out of their experience with God. And I think we could all testify to, how personal some of our songs can be. It can be something that's so real and so meaningful to us that comes out of our hearts because of our personal experiences with God. That's how I understand this. But I don't really know. I didn't read too much where people made comments. But what we do know is that that song is a song of redemption and how God has redeemed them. And it's very personal, it sounds like to me, and very beautiful before the throne. And then we have a description of who these 144,000 are. They're not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Now, I have a big question mark in my Bible there, because it's like, not defiled with women, but virgins. That almost doesn't make sense. And I even looked up the word virgin to make sure that it was actually defining a maiden, because sometimes, so I don't know exactly how to explain that other than in the sense of harlotry, or being defiled by loving other gods, which is what happened to Israel, literally in idolatry. But certainly it can happen to us as Christians if we begin, or not just Christians, but as people, if we worship other gods. It's harlotry. And
The love of money.
love of money is another, yeah. I mean, there are ways that we can be defiled, whether we're men or women, but as believers or as just human beings, that we can be defiled by the things that we worship. And so these 144,000s have kept their heart pure in their worship of God. That's how I would understand that. And they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And, oh Lord, could that be true of all of us? That we would follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And at the end of it, it says that there's no deceit in them, and they're without fault. And I don't think that necessarily means that they're without sin, but that they're transparent in what sin has been in their heart. They've acknowledged it before the Lord, and it's been cleansed and taken care of. Is my water?
The Amplified just adds that they're blameless, spotless, untainted, beyond reproach.
And that, isn't that the description that, I think it's in Ephesians, that the Lord wants to present his bride, a spotless bride without blemish. And that's only, as we know, through the blood of Christ that could be possible. And I thought it would be good to read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. I'm still getting kind of the end of my cold, so I'm hoping my cough doesn't get. This is such a description of what I think we're dealing with in our time, in our day. Chapter 2, well, I think we're going to just read 9 through 11. But it's interesting because what it's talking about in the first part of chapter 2, what Paul is talking about is the apostasy and this great falling away that's going to happen, and then the revelation of the man of sin. And and he's the one who exalts himself. I'm reading verse 4. Above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Who does that sound like that we just read about last week?
The beast.
The beast.
The beast. The beast.
Is that the same as the Antichrist? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, Antichrist.
Although Jonathan reminded us last week that, the word Antichrist isn't used in Revelation.
So he's a beast. So
He's
the
the
beast is
beast
going to
there,
come and
but
rule.
certainly we know that's his
Right.
description, yeah. Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan. There again, the beast. He's operating, Satan is operating through the beast with power, signs, and lying wonders. And we read about that last week, the lying wonders of being killed and then coming back to life again, seemingly. And with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. For this reason, God will send them a strong delusion that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. I think that's what's, it's the opposite. These 144,000 are those who didn't believe the lie. They were not deceived. They are not deceived. Because why? Because they love the truth. And to me, that's such a challenge for us in our day, because there's so much out there that is a lie. And even within religious circles, we have to be careful what we take into our heart and stand on. And that's why it's so important for us to know the Word. It keeps us.
The 144,000, though, had to come to faith in Christ after he removed the church from the earth,
Right.
because if they had already believed, they would have been gone.
Yeah.
Isn't that the right word?
That's the technical term. I think that's Greek, right?
It's Greek, yeah.
Which is in the Bible.
Yes.
Not God.
That's true. And they are the ones who bear the testimony of Jesus during this time of darkness and deception. And I think they bore the consequences of that, let's say, of taking that stand and remaining true to what they knew, who they knew was the truth. you know, because what's happening all around them is this dark deception, and we read last week that those who would not take, well, we're going to read that here today also, but you know, they're being commanded to take the mark of the beast in order to buy and sell. And these 144,000 are going to pay the price for standing firm and refusing that, to worship the beast and to take his mark. And I think I love it, the fact that the contrast that we have here in 14 is these 144,000 are sealed, and now it's telling us that they're sealed with his Father's name, with the Lamb's Father's name on their foreheads. And that's sort of in contrast to what was required of the beast, that you would be marked with his number in the forehead or on your hand. So you can see that opposition. We've been listening to some teaching this week where they were talking about the usurping spirit, which I really like that description of Satan and what his spirit is, and that is always to usurp the place of God. You know, he wanted to exalt himself above the throne of God. And since in the garden, that's exactly what he, you know, is trying to do even today, is to usurp the place of God and take his place on God's throne. And that's kind of what you see. You know, Jonathan talked about the trinity of the dragon, Satan, and the two beasts, the Antichrist and
False prophet.
the false prophet, thank you, as being in opposition to the Trinity, the Holy Trinity. And we just see that over and over again in the scriptures, where Satan, as an angel of light, comes to deceive and to usurp, always to usurp the place of Jesus in our lives, or the place of the Holy Spirit in our lives. And these 144,000, they resisted that usurping spirit and remained faithful to the Lord. Rosalie, are you reading Amplified?
Mhm.
Does it give any different sense? Does it come out any differently there?
No.
Okay. Another just interesting thing to think about is the fact that they are the first fruits to God and the Lamb. And one of the things I thought about was, if these are the same as the 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, meaning they're Messianic Jews who are preaching the gospel, giving the gospel during the time of the early days of the tribulation period, that it's possible that, you know, a first fruit is sort of a promise of the harvest that is to come. And so I was thinking of it in terms of, these are the first fruits of Israel, of the Jewish people, that give the promise of the harvest that is yet to come. When, for example, in Romans, where it talks about all Israel shall be saved, in the end of Romans 11. But also in Romans 11, it talks about the Jewish faith, the Jewish people, being the root that is if the lump is holy, if the first fruit is holy, then the whole lump is holy. I don't think we'll go there today because of time, but you could look that up and read chapter 11 of Romans and see how Paul speaks about the Jewish root being the first fruit to God. And we count on that being true, that there will be a harvest to come of these first fruits. So then the second preview or vision would be think, let's see, it's verses 6 and 7. So, Carrie, will you read that for us? Back to Revelation 14, 6 and 7.
Okay, then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and springs of water."
So we have this angel flying through heaven, preaching the gospel, and I like it, I just, to those who dwell on the earth. And when we were doing chapter 13 last week, I kept seeing that verse, that phrase, all who dwell on the earth, and it came up like 3 or 4 times in chapter 13. And I think it's, it's significant in the sense that the church is in heaven, and then there are those who are still dwelling on earth. And remember we talked about, I think was in chapter 7, how we see here again God's desire for all men to be saved. Because here, even in the midst of the tribulation period, he is still giving the gospel to people and saying, come unto me, worship me. I am the one who made heaven and earth and the sea and the springs of water. But it's almost like this is the last call. It's like judgment is coming. And this angel is saying, worship God now before that judgment comes. Because as we'll see, that judgment is not pretty. But I love that's the heart of God, that He desires all men to be saved, and he keeps reaching out with that hand of mercy and grace.
It says every nation, tribe, and language, and people. Everyone's going to hear the gospel.
going to hear. That's true. I hadn't really seen it that way, but it does say every. He's going to make sure that goes forth, and I just love him because that's his heart. I mean, how could we not trust him? Even though the judgments are terrible, that his heart has that desire. Then number 3 of the previews is 9 through 11. Somebody have that?
Revelation?
9 through 11,
Yeah.
verses 9 through 11.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And another, the third angel followed them and spoke with a
Oh,
loud
I'm sorry, it's 8.
Just eight.
Starts at 8,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry, yeah.
And another, the second angel followed, saying, "It has fallen, Babylon the Great has fallen. She made all the nations drink the wine of her sexual immorality, which brings wrath." And another, a third angel followed them and spoke with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he will also drink the wine of God's wrath, which is poured full strength into the cup of his anger. He will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the sight of the holy angels and in the sight of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment will go up forever and ever. There is no rest day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, or anyone who receives the mark of its name."
Okay. So I guess I kind of broke those two into 2 different things, but it's basically the same message. But this angel comes out, a second angel comes out and declares that Babylon is fallen. And because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And I think here again that idea of her fornication is just the whole idea of spiritual adultery. That,
My version says, he will also drink of the wine of...
we're going to see in Revelation 17 and 18 more detail of this, the falling of Babylon. So we won't talk about that so much today, but certainly we know that lies ahead. But it is interesting to read in Jeremiah. It's just such a description of that intoxication and how here again Satan desires to draw away. He wants to usurp the love and worship that is due to God and bring it to himself.
I'm not following what Babylon is symbolizing here.
Well, I think Babylon it is representing the harlot, the harlotry, the idolatry. Yeah.
My Bible in the bottom says, in the Old Testament, Babylon was a center of idolatry, the occult, and immorality. And then it says, although Babylon is a symbol of the satanic world system, it is possible such a system could be centered in a literal city. Historically, there has been speculation that geographical Babylon may be restored in modern-day Iraq. Whether symbolic or literal, Babylon will have great religious and political significance in the last days.
Yeah. Well, do you remember when Saddam Hussein
He was trying to do just
he
that.
was trying to rebuild the city of Babylon? And I kept thinking about, this actual Babylon being reestablished. And of course, I don't know how long ago, but do you remember that a lot of times people were saying America was Babylon? That's the spirit of worldliness and power, and I dismiss that. I don't, and I think when we get, America is imperfect by any means, but it's much more than that. It's much more than one system of government. And I think when we get into 17 and 18, chapter 17 and 18, we'll get a better picture of Babylon. But certainly, it's the whole world system that just sets itself up against the knowledge of God. It's what needs to be brought down. And it will be brought down. And it won't be pretty when that happens.
Jonathan Cahn's book, Return of the Gods, I don't know if you read that.
I haven't.
In front of the New York Stock Exchange is a bull.
Mm-hmm.
And he equated that to back to this time of when they were using bulls and goats for sacrifice.
Oh. Uh-huh.
And how that, the strength and all that was, and America has gotten to where we have given up on God and gone to money and
Putting our trust in
yeah,
stock market and
yeah,
yeah,
that's a great place to trust.
yeah, right.
In gold we trust.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be, that's certainly part of it. That is certainly part of what the whole what Babylon represents, is just putting our trust in anything besides God, and especially our heart. Where does our heart go? Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So let's read, Jeremiah 50:38. Irene, you have that right there, I can see.
Yes.
I think that's the one I want.
A drought is against her waters, and they will be dried up, and that would be the river Euphrates.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is prophetic is that God will dry up that river in order for the armies to be able to cross on dry land for the gathering
Armageddon.
at Armageddon. It's not a battle, it's a gathering. And then it goes on to say, for it is the land of carved images, and they are insane with their idols.
That's the reason I picked that one. This whole chapter 50 in Jeremiah, it's interesting to read. Maybe previewing for, what lies ahead, because it's all about Babylon and what was going on in Babylon at the time of Jeremiah and the prophecy that is given against. And then also, since you're already there, 51.
Babylon, this is verses 7 and 8, 51. Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunk. The nations drank her wine, therefore the nations are deranged. Babylon has suddenly fallen and been destroyed. Wail for her. Take balm for her pain. Perhaps she may be healed.
And
Or
we,
perhaps not.
perhaps not, yeah. Yeah, but it'd be interesting, of course, this was during the time of Jeremiah, but as we know, that prophecies often had an in-time fulfillment and a future fulfillment. And those two chapters in Jeremiah really make a description of the condition of Babylon and, why in Revelation this declaration of Babylon falling. And it's a preview. It's a preview of Babylon falling. Okay, and then the third angel comes forth and gives the declaration that anyone who worships the beast in his image and receives the mark on the forehead will drink the wine of the wrath of God. That's what Debbie was reading. And oh my. Here again, there in the future chapters of Revelation, there will be a deeper description of what that will be like. But to think of being tormented with fire in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb, day and night, no rest. That is the future of those who worship the beast in his image. And what a horrible thought. I mean, it's just a horrible thought. So let's see. Let's look at Mark 9:38 through 42. I think it's Matthew. Let me just check. I think I might have written it.
Look at Matthew 9.
Yeah, let's see if that's.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, no, that doesn't hit either.
Mark 9:38 says,
Yeah, it's not.
John said to him, Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name. We tried to prevent him because he was not following us. But Jesus said, do not hinder him, for there is no one who will perform a miracle in my name, and he will be able soon afterwards to speak evil of me.
Yeah. I think it was down further is what I was looking for. I see it here.
Mark 9:48.
Yeah, 42. It starts, even in 43. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off, for it is better for you to enter into life maimed, rather than having two hands and go to hell, into the fire that shall never be quenched. So this is Jesus speaking about the fire that shall never be quenched. Where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. And if your foot causes you to sin, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life lame rather than having 2 feet to be cast into hell, into the fire that shall never be quenched, where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched, and so on. So, even Jesus himself is speaking of this terrible judgment of eternal damnation.
Yeah, because 38 doesn't really make sense with what we're
Yeah.
studying.
Right. It's- But I just, just this no rest from the torment. I don't know, does that shake you up? And what really, I have no answer to it, but it just the fact that it's in the presence of the Lamb, being tormented in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Just, it's a horrible destiny for those who receive the mark of the beast and who worship the beast in his image. And I guess I'm just glad that he has those in his army today of evangelists who have that same heart, that every man would be saved and none would come to that point. But the reality seems to be that there are those who refuse the grace of God, and it's a grievous thing.
It just seems almost beyond thinking that a loving God would, of course, he doesn't send them, they volunteer or whatever, go to hell,
Right.
but eternally torture, eternally, it's just kind of beyond my thinking. It really is.
I know, it is.
I can see maybe just snuff them out, just be gone,
Just to be
rather
gone.
than tormenting them.
Right, and I mean, isn't that the question that the people who won't come to Jesus? I can't believe in a God that would send people to hell. Good people, people that, in fact, I think you were telling me about somebody you knew who had just said to you that I have a friend who's Buddhist or Muslim, who is such a good man. He does all these good things, How could a loving God send someone like that to hell? I don't know what the answer is. It really.
Well, the Jehovah Witness and some of the other ones they believe in heaven, but they don't believe in hell. They basically just say those people are just going to go to sleep. And they'll just stay in a sleep-type state and not a tormented state.
Right.
Because they don't want to believe.
Did they read?
I don't
The
know
Bible?
if they do, they don't.
I mean, because what we just read, that's.
But I've
it's,
heard that, that's been told to me a couple of times.
Yeah.
That, how can a loving God send someone to hell for eternity? So no, it's not. It's just that you're separated from God in a sleep state for eternity.
But do you believe the word?
Yeah,
that's what it says.
I don't want to
Like I
believe it. I don't want to believe that, but it's there, and it's.
But God gives you a choice. He says, today, you can believe or not. Your choice.
Well, and it's like Clinton said, he doesn't send people to hell, they choose.
Yeah.
That's their choice. But we were talking about it the other day, and, the fact that we're, as believers, we're given eternal life. But as non-believers, there's also eternity.
Yeah.
It isn't just over. There's eternity, and it's an eternity of separation. And
Last week, maybe you saw it, we watched the program about this Muslim that came to know the Lord. And he says there, in the Quran, there's no love, period, nothing. He didn't know what love was until he accepted Christ. And it was just a magnificent revelation to him, is realizing the love of Christ. It really made it, it was a real good story that he did. This is a true story, that he did come to Christ. And in fact, one prayer was that he had a hard time removing himself from the Muslim faith. He prayed to Allah. He thought he was praying to Jesus, and he was praying to Allah. But Christ honored that prayer. And he turned him around, and it's an amazing story, I tell you.
Well, I think that, when people seek the truth and say to the Lord, I want to know what is true, then he pulls us in that direction out of whatever places of misinformation we may be. That's the grace and mercy of God. If people just, all it takes is one turn. And then he takes hold of that and, expands heaven for us.
And again, back to 6, the angel is absolutely preaching to all, every language, every people.
And that just reminds us again of what it says in Romans 1, that really there's no excuse, because what is to be known of God has been made known.
And I imagine the message will become stronger and stronger the closer we get people are to this.
Yeah.
That he's desperate to save them.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
there's one song that talks about God is only love. And I'm going, that is such a bad song. It is not scriptural, because God is holy, God is righteous, God is just. And if you take those pieces out of the equation, what you've got left is something kind of like marshmallow cream. And that kind of love just isn't gonna.
Well, it's deceptive as well. That is deceptive. I mean, he is love. That is his nature, of
Part of the
course.
story.
Yeah.
It's only
He's a
part.
judge, righteous judge.
He's also a righteous judge. And if you think about it, what we all long for is peace and an existence without violence and war and sickness and all the things that heaven will be, or that our life with Christ eternally will be. It has to be, the earth has to be swept of evil in all its forms, and really the greatest evil is not to believe in God, because that's where sin comes from, is when we reject Him and turn away from Him. So it has to come, but it's just hard for us as human beings, maybe because we know our own failings and how little we deserve salvation, that we could picture.
We
Yeah.
listened to, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
Frank Tourette, is that right? And he was explaining this. Somebody had asked him, why would a loving God send my niece or whatever to hell? And he said, well, he gave the illustration that it's like when you have somebody that is pursuing you, that has a really big crush on you, and you keep saying, no, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that. They can't be made to all of a sudden fall in love with that person. And he was saying that God is like that. He pursues you and he does everything he can to draw you to him. And if you just keep saying, no, 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 finally he's going to say, okay. And because he is so loving, he doesn't want you to be made to love him and to have to turn to him and follow him, because it's not love.
It's not
I mean, so, and it was kind of like, wow, it's just sad when people just reject that. And so that was an interesting light to put it in, but he explained it much better.
Well, no, but I think, that's just the kind of thing that we have to seek it out, to understand the justice of God and the holiness of God, that, and yet, and be able to bring that together with His love, with what His love is. It's a tough thing.
Yeah.
But I think we have to look at it and just, I don't know, let the Lord minister to our hearts what
I keep
the reality is.
thinking about God's law that He gave His people before the Messiah came. What sits on the top? The mercy
the
seat.
mercy seat.
He is all of that,
Yeah, yeah,
all the time. That's why he's God.
yeah,
He
that's
can't
right,
do that.
yeah. Yep,
And he has the right to do verse 50. Is it 15 or 17? Sorry, transition time. 14. He has the right to do what he's doing in verse 14. And he does it. And this is what, I'm always caught up in the order. But he does it before the bowls. He reaps the wicked. He didn't give him a chance. So that's a big question in my mind,
yeah.
the chronology.
Well, I think in the sense of these being previews,
Yes.
this verse 14 is Jonathan's talking about when the one like the Son of Man on a cloud, and he has this sharp sickle in his hand and reaping the harvest of the earth. It's a preview of what we're going to see in the bowls. That's how I interpret that. That doesn't necessarily happen before, but it's previewing it, that is coming. But
He's coming.
we'll see. Yeah. I know we're not going to get through this chapter today, but we'll keep going for a few more minutes, and then we can finish it up next week. But then I kind of separated out this. Oh, and I apologize. I don't know what it is about my computer, but the way it printed this, and I couldn't fix it. I went back and tried to fix it. The number 5 is over here on the margin, and it's supposed to be in front of the patience of the saints. That's the fifth vision or preview that I separated out. And here, well, let's just read it. It's 12 and 13. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, "Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them." So let's just real quick turn back on one page here, because in 13 it also talks about the patience of the saints. What am I doing right now? Where is it?
10?
I think it's 10. Yeah. Can you read that, since you have it right there?
Yeah, 13:10, right?
Mm-hmm.
He that leadeth into the captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
And Carrie, you might, if your Bible has anything to say about that verse, or the verse over here in 14, but what is he saying about, what is the patience of the saints?
Amplified says, here's the encouragement for the steadfast endurance.
Steadfast endurance, yeah.
Encouragement for the steadfast. Encouragement.
So, to me, based on these two passages, that the encouragement for the endurance of the saints during this period of time, and the saints, of course, are those who keep the commandments of God and faith in Jesus. And I think, if it is those in the time of the tribulation period who keep that faith and keep the commandments of God, then their endurance is that they hold to that testimony. And then in verse 13 it says, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." So in the sense, how I understand this is, just like the two witnesses gave their witness until the time of their witnessing was finished, and then they were killed and taken to heaven. So it is true of the saints, that to die from this point on is a blessing, because what is coming is even worse than what they've been experiencing. And so their endurance. And I think of that, like, Penny, I always think of you, because we talk about, you know, the persecuted church now and the sufferings that they go through because of their faith, and sometimes even into death. But it's that endurance that is the patience of the saints. It's the endurance, and then at the time of death, they're released from their labors and they rest. So, you know, there's that sense in which God knows the timing, and their death is a blessing, because well, of course, they go to heaven, or they go to be with Christ, but they're also preserved from further suffering, further persecution. That's how I interpret this. But Jonathan, you have a different?
No.
The
I
one
like
thing in mine that also says is the Lord's word of judgment upon Judah, see Jeremiah 15:2 and 3, become words of counsel and encouragement. So the Lord is counseling still too, you know. So I thought that was,
Counsel and encouragement.
yeah.
This is the patience of the saints, the endurance. And, you know, we don't necessarily, at this point in our lives, maybe we don't have the persecution from the outside, but sometimes there's a point in a person's life where they've suffered long enough, and they've endured with patience and confidence and faith in the Lord. They don't give up their faith. But when death comes, it can be a blessing. You know, Paul says, whether I live or whether I die, I win. Either way, you know. But I that's just my understanding of what that means.
The other thing it reminds me of is that group who are collected under the throne, who are saying, "How long, O Lord?"
It's their patience too.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the word overcomers that we heard in chapters 2 and 3. Blessed are those who overcome. And then there's a promise to those people every time.
Every time.
They have endured.
Yeah.
They have been patient, and they have overcome. And then in the New Testament, it talks about Christ is our example of the best overcomer.
The overcomer. The
ultimate. Overcomer.
Yeah. Who overcame death and hell. Well, and it's interesting, in just the contrast here that we just read that in the verses where it talks about being tormented. In verse 11 it says, "The smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. They have no rest, day or night." You know, that here again is that contrast of rest, blessing and rest.
I'm wondering if there isn't a difference between the unsaved dead and these worshipers of the beast and taking his
The
mark.
difference in degree of punishment?
Yeah. I just wonder,
Yeah.
because they didn't take the mark. You know, the unsaved haven't been taking the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to do it accidentally. It will be deliberate.
Well, that's true. It won't be just sort of.
Is that someone here?
I think it might be my daughter-in-law's.
Probably is.
I'll call her.
That's
Merry Christmas.
Merry
That's something
Christmas.
Merry Christmas. That's something to think about, to look into. Did you all hear what Rosalie said? That maybe there's a difference between the unsaved dead and their punishment and those in this period of time where it's such a deliberate choice, you know, to take the mark of the beast, to worship the beast. Maybe.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Though, you can be starved into it or whatever, you know, because you're not going to buy or sell.
Right.
And some of those people, but they're still going to have to choose, do I want to do this?
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to do it, even then,
Yeah.
they're going to know what they're doing.